All right, guys, thank you for us here today. And today, as you can see, we're going to have a session about how to read a topic effectively. As you've seen in the promotion posts and the ones we sent to the group chats, it's really important to learn how to read a topic in the first place. Now, reading a topic is not just about taking the keywords from it and generating arguments, but it's more than that. It's more about focus on the specific words that actually make a difference so that you could use them for your own benefit to win the argument or to win the debate in general. It's important to put yourself in the other person's position. It's also important to consider your own position so that you can guarantee winning. So in general, that it gives you the ability to control both sides. It's like you're controlling the other person's arguments, expecting what they're about to present and more. And all of that will be learned here with us today. In addition to that, we will be teaching you how to create a goal for your thing. And at the end of the session, we'll give you a chance to ask questions. And also before that, we're going to have a practice session. We're going to give you a topic and then you're going to practice what we teach you here today. All right, Kunwar, the second slide. As you can see, our purpose is to help you analyze the topic and set solid goals for your team, make winning easier overall. That's exactly what I spoke about. Because making a goal is really...
Mama has sent something. Reading that.
Yes. Anyways, so as we say, that making the goal is real essential sometimes. It's not something a lot of people are familiar with, making a goal. In other places, they call it a claim or something. But where I'm from, we always mention the goal first. The first speaker always gets to mention the goal. That's something real essential to connect in your arguments, avoid contradictions between member and another. It happens so many times. It's like yesterday, I had a daily debate with a few members, and I noticed that some of them don't really stick to the general topic. They swerve away from it. They start generating ideas that are far from the topic. That's something you will not do if you stick to the rules we're going to give you today. By that, you can guarantee winning. And you can even use it as an argument against the other persons or the opposite team. You can detect their arguments and witness if they are, or tell them if the arguments are connected to the topic. Use it as a fuel wheel. These are the objectives. Third slide, sir. Now, these are the objectives we have here. No, third slide. Yeah. What we're going to do here today, as we said before, we're going to help you analyze, also master setting a solid goal, and at the end, we're going to practice. I don't want to repeat it again so that we save up time. Fourth one.
Oh, no, then I'll take over now.
Yeah.
So the first thing we're going to do is learn about the types of motions, right? So basically, there are three types of motions, being policy, analysis, and actor. So I'm going to cover them one by one. Let's start with policy motions, right? So policy motions are basically motions which have the form that this house would do X, whatever the subject is. Now, these involve the government arguing whether they should enact policy X, or such motions are about whether the House should do X, with government teams arguing, government being the proposition side, arguing that they should, and opposition teams arguing that they should not. And that's pretty simple. For the purposes of debate, the government teams are the government and the politicians that make it up, and the debate is about whether they should or should not do a policy. Right? So it's not like the debate does not consider the actual government or the actual policymakers. If you are the government team, then that is it. You are the government. So basically, the thing is that if the government has come up with a policy, the opposition cannot counter it by saying that, oh, the real world government or the actual policymakers will never implement it. The opposition cannot do that, right? So let's take, for example, the motion that this house would ban cigarettes. The question of this debate is whether or not the policy should be enacted in the manner that the government team has set up, not just about whether or not cigarettes are bad or good, right? So opposition can agree that yes, cigarettes are bad, but oppose the policy of banning cigarettes altogether and propose a policy of their own. Next up, we have analysis motions. Now, analysis motions have three subtypes. The first is which have the form of this house believes that X. Now, these are value judgment debates. They require the government teams to argue for the truth of the statement, while the opposition teams argue that X is false. The government says X is true, the opposition says X is false. There is no need for a government teams to implement a model like in policy debates, right? So, for example, the motion this house believes that there is no moral obligation to follow the law. I'll just real quick type that in the chat as well. This house believes that there is no moral obligation to follow the law. Right. So in this motion, the debate is whether or not the statement is true, not about whether or not the government should do anything about the statement. Both teams here need to define the terms in their own context. So in this motion, for example, it would be to define, let's say, moral obligation, the way the government or the opposition team sees it. Now, the next subtype in analysis motions are the motion that begin with this house supports or opposes X. These also do not need any sort of model or policy. Instead, the government teams need to argue that they would either symbolically, maybe politically, or whatever, support a person, a claim, or institution, or whatever. And the opposition need to argue here that X should not be supported in the way that the government sees it. So in this, let's take the example that the US involvement in Middle East. This house supports the US involvement in Middle East. Oh, sorry about the spellings there. It's middle. Yeah. So in this, the government teams, the proposition side is arguing that the US involvement is positive in totality, and the opposition teams are opposing the motion in totality. Now, this in totality that I've mentioned is very important, right? Because such large scale motions, the US involvement in Middle East, that is a pretty big topic, right? So of course, if we talk about a motion such like this, there are going to be pros and there are going to be cons. So from let's say if I'm the government, I cannot ignore the cons of US involvement in Middle East, but I have to prove that the pros outweigh the cons, and the opposition has to do with the opposite, obviously, prove that the cons are better than the pros. Next on, let's move to the third type of analysis motions, which would be motions that begin with this house regrets X.
Before you begin, guys, make sure to take notes. Guys, I want you to take notes. You should bring a notebook or something and take down notes on what we're speaking about.
Get your copy and pens, please.
For the practice later. It's real.
All right, I'll proceed then. So yeah, the third subtype of analysis motions are basically which say this house regrets X. Now, these ask whether the world would have been a better place without a particular policy or subject or whatever X defines. Now, teams must describe how an alternative world would have been if X was not implemented in the first place. So, for example, let's say that this house regrets the selection of Joe Biden as a Democratic nominee. Please mute yourself, whoever it is. All right, thank you. Yeah, so the example motion, this house.
If you want to talk, then raise your hand.
Yes, we'll take questions out of the sessions, by the way, so don't worry about that. I'll type the topic out. This house regrets the selection of Joe as a Democratic nominee. Right, so in this motion, the teams cannot just debate about the merits or the downsides of Biden as a Democratic nominee. Instead, they should consider how an alternative world would look like, where there would have been a different Democratic nominee, and then whether that nominee would have been better, would have led to better or worse political outcomes. or then last being actor motions. Actor motions are different. They are, let's say, somewhat special, right? So these motions are, they begin with this house as A would do X. A is our actor here, and the X is the subject. Teams debating in these motions should therefore consider what actor A's knowledge, values, and interests are, and explain why the motion is or is not in actor A's best interest. Unlike in previously discussed types, actor debates are not about whether or not X action is necessarily best for the world. So, if example, the motion is this house as a parent would not send their child to private school. I repeat, this house as a parent would not send their child to private school. This debate should take place from the perspective of a parent. The government should consider what the interests of the parents are, and then what the interests of the parents are, and then explain why not sending their child to private school meets those particular interests. In these type of debates, opposition has two options. They can either do one of the two things, which is, first, they can either agree with teams about the interests of the parent, but argue that their proposed action does not meet those interests. Or secondly, they can argue that parents have different interests than the interests raised by the government team altogether. So I hope that that is clear to you. Moving on, we have the words to look out for. Now this should be
Yeah.
pretty clear with the last slide as well. But
Yeah, I
Nasser.
hope you guys have the types of motion my friend here has mentioned. Now, you shouldn't only consider what type of motion it is, but in addition to that, you should pay attention to the specific words, which is almost the same thing. But this is like a way to simplify what my friend has said. Now, if you consider the first thing, we have the word, for example, want. We're gonna begin from the middle. Now, the word want, as you can see, is to create blanks, support, said situation, or to clarify why it won't work. For example, this house wants to support X, for example. So the team in the proposition should go fully with them. Create blanks. You should not only show the positives of this X thing or subject, but you should create a plan in addition to that, which is something similar to the goal we're going to mention later. Now, you create the plan, support it with the arguments, and list your arguments according to the speakers, first, second, third, and after that, you should detect the other team's arguments. Now, if he was in the opposition, you should not create another plan or something. No, just deny what the House believes or the House wants. I'm very sorry. The House wants this. If you're in the opposition, they go completely against it. Go against the other team's plan, because we'd like to assume that the proposition team has created a plan. Now you should go against it. The other word, believe, you should either insist on something or completely deny it. It's quite easy. That's what most or the majority of topics are. This house believes, this house believes, this house thinks, sometimes serves the same meaning. So in this case, you should either insist if you are in the proposition or deny the thing completely. Now, these are some techniques. And the third one, as you can see, is regret. As my friend has mentioned, seek an alternative. As he said in the topic, you can find in the chat, this house regrets electing Joe Biden, for example. We don't like to mention names, but you see, now, this house regrets this person. So you should find an alternative, as my friend has mentioned. In the proposition team, you should support the thing completely. But in the opposition. But in the proposition, you should find an alternative. And sometimes the alternative is not completely different. As you're gonna see in the topic we're gonna discuss later or give you the chance to practice. Sometimes the alternative is something very similar. You don't have to go a completely different route with an alternative. Sometimes it's just the same thing with a small adjustment so that it can make sense to you. After all, you need to make sure that everything here makes sense. It has to all make sense. Now, Kunwar, would you please go back to the slide with the listen arguments? Listen arguments, yeah. Now, guys, it's important to also consider the listen of your arguments, which comes first and which comes after that. Not someone else is joining. Now, when you are given a topic, sometimes you're not given the position. Sometimes you don't know if you're going to be in the proposition or the opposition. Sometimes you're only given a topic, as we do sometimes. We send the topic in the chat, and then you need to prepare both sides. But what I'm talking about here is even if you are given the position you're going to be standing in or the motion of yours, even if you are given, you need to also consider the other team's position. Why is that helpful? As you can see, it can help you generate more arguments. It can help you saving up arguments for the other team. It can help you expect what the opponent's arguments are going to be like, which is going to result in better and quicker refuttals. Like, it's quite obvious. It's like you are seeing through them. But if you're only preparing your own side, you only pay attention to what is given to you or what you should be doing. But if you pay attention to the other side's position, expect their arguments, it helps you generate quicker refuttals, which is going to be better overall, help you win. It's like you are expecting what they're going to say before they even say it. So what's better than that to win? And after that, we're going to go to the practice session with Mr. Kunwar. And by this topic, you will clearly learn what to do. Now, the first thing, again, just to remind you what you have to do here. First, please write down the topic, and I will give you a list of the things you should do. First, you should pick the keywords. All right, guys, I give you time. And we're going to select one of y'all, or you can raise your hand if you have did what we asked you to do. All right. Now you should pick the keywords. Let's practice the keywords, Kunwar.
Yeah, so
Yep.
just
So we
of
have
y'all.
keyword. I mean, the topic is quite obvious here, and it's very simple. All right. The only thing I can see is the word international days. I don't see anything other than that. It's very general and very broad too, right? Now we have given you some examples. The Tree Day, Mother's Day, those kind of days. Not the national days, international days. Okay, guys? Another thing you should pay attention to is the word regret there. We have explained that. Yep, thank you to GST in the chat. The word regret. So what does that mean? Would you please open the microphone and tell us what the word regret here requires you to do if you are in the proposition, for example?
It's in the opposition. Like this topic is like opposite, like it's not supporting international days.
You're not supporting international days. So what you should do in this case?
In this case, I'll be in the opposition. No, so
Yes,
the
but
proposition.
what are the arguments? No. I said, okay, we're gonna begin from the opposition, as you said. If you were in the opposition, if you were against the topic, what would you do?
I would talk about why international days should be there and like why we should not regret them according to the topic.
So you're gonna support the national days and give a few examples on why national days are positive, for example, right? All right. Thank you. That's exactly what you should do. And now you're ready. If you come across this topic one day, you'll be ready to do it. Someone else, please.
Yeah, someone will please raise a hand. Give an argument or something.
No, you're gonna be in the proposition, and you're gonna tell us what to do in this case. Anyone?
Anyone wants to go? It's okay if you get it wrong as well. It's just practice.
Yes. Okay. How about you do it, Kunwar? If you were in the proposition, what would you do?
Right. So being the proposition, so the topic is this house regrets international days. Now, the first thing that goes in my mind is that I should probably create a world where international days do not exist. So if I'm the proposition, my goal is to create a world where international days do not exist, and then make arguments which are basically supporting the thing. that, yeah, international days should not exist because whatever your argument is, whatever the reason is.
Exactly. So as he said, an important thing, we should completely deny the existence of international days. I would like to think that international days don't even exist. So I'm gonna try to deny in every way possible. I will try to explain why international days have been failed. And in addition to that, that's something you can do. But another thing you would do, which is probably better in my opinion, to find an alternative. Sometimes I actually done this debate before, and I was in the proposition. Now, I did not completely deny things, but I found an alternative to it, which is instead of international days, I want to make international weeks, for example. Does that make sense to y'all? It's an alternative, but it's not so different. You should stick to the topic. The topic specified by saying the word days. So maybe the word weeks is good. I have doubt. What about that?
You can go ahead, you can unmute and speak.
We would like to listen to y'all, as we said in the beginning. This is going to be a discussion. It's not only an informative session where we just talk. It's a discussion. Everyone can talk. Now that's a failed statement because you say that you have doubt, but you haven't justified it. That's something I would do in debates. Now, if you go in a debate, I have a question. Of course,
If you want to write it in the chat, that's also fine.
of course.
Should we go ahead?
Yeah, Krishna, go ahead, ask a question. Um,
I will give you a chance to do that later. Now we can begin with the goals and claims with Kanishka.
Yeah. Can you go to the next slide? Okay.
Yep.
So, goals are crucial for you. One sec, I'm really sorry. For ensuring, just a second, give me a second. Yeah. It's really crucial for ensuring your arguments are connected and coherent, and you don't go off topic, which most debaters do. So connecting the arguments. So all your points should work together in order to support the main goal or stance or the keyword that you've identified. Um, the next point would be contradicting any like avoiding any contradictions. So if your argument conflicts with each other, it usually weakens your point because you're saying the opposite of what your stance was initially. And also, clarity plays a big role since keeping everything aligned avoids any confusion for like both the audience and the judges. There was this other famous quote saying, "Think of your claims as the foundation of the building. Without a solid base, so everything falls down." Um, yeah. Can you like go to the next slide?
Yep. As she said in the contradictions part, sometimes the debaters go way too far in the argument. They end up going against their own team. So that's something you would like to avoid. And by creating a goal, you can avoid that. Yep.
Okay, so moving on to importance of goals. So firstly, after you've set like since you set a goal, you're reminding the opposition and the judges every at each argument that you're going back to your goal. So it reinforces what you're saying in the beginning or your stance. Another thing is that if you have your goal clear, like as I mentioned earlier, all your points are going to be related to the goal, so which adds weight and credibility to your position as well, and may give you like a edge over the other debaters who wouldn't actually focus so much on the goal. um and it does not like it helps you to be on topic and avoid going like off topic. Another quote that I saw while I was doing this was, by keeping your goals in mind, you can guide the debate and persuade the audience more effectively, which reinforces what I was saying earlier. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Anyone has a question before we go into the how to form a goal? If anyone has a question, then write it down or raise a hand. Why is this study known as? What is this study known as? Could you please elaborate the question? If I don't get your question, if I get your question right, I mean, you mean the goal thing, right? It's not really a study or something that's very known. It's just something I came up with. Even these people, with me, my friends, it's probably the first time they heard about a goal. I mean, it's similar to a claim, but it's more integrated. You mentioned it at the very beginning of this speech. It can help you connect the arguments. And after you present an argument, you connect the argument to the goal. Again,
Could you mute yourself? We could go ahead.
yeah.
So now that we learned why and how important the goal is, how do we form the goal? So if this statement is this house believes in press freedom, the keyword we would identify would be belief. You would decide whether you're for it or you're against it, and if uh, I should fully support the statement and focus on the consequences. So once I've chosen whether I am for or against it, I should completely go with that stance and talk about its consequences in terms of the consequences towards different people, different stakeholders, and lastly, the goal would reduce impact, resulting in the propaganda that completely free press is spread. So like there should not be extremes, um uh, but there should be like a few disadvantages discussed. You cannot like completely avoid the against if you're for.
And let's be guys, the goal doesn't have to be just something like I would like to call it a plan or something. It has to be something like a plan. You always connect the goal or the arguments to the plan. Another name for it is a plan. It shouldn't be also a statement. Sometimes the goal shouldn't be something like we believe that we should. No, it should be something like a plan. We want to do this. We want to avoid, as you can see in the one we are shown. Can you start the discussion? Yes, of course. Just a second. Kunwar, can you start with the Jamboard thing?
Wait, I have to stop sharing for a second.
Or before that, we're gonna do how to form a goal. Now we're gonna teach you how to form a goal. Okay?
Yeah.
You can send the link down there in the chat.
Give me a second. I'll just stop sharing for a second. Okay, there's some fault in the link. So, all right, let's do one thing then. Give me a second. Let's share again. All right, now, go ahead, read the topic, guys. The topic is that this house prefers a world where instead of charging tuition fees to students upfront, universities collect a portion of their income upon graduation. Analyze this topic, identify the keywords, and then form a goal. I'll give you all 5 minutes. Then after that, raise your hands after you've formed a goal and identify the keyword. Right, so the time right now is, let me
Could you
just
please
check.
send this in the chat?
The motion.
I
Yes.
typed it. I typed it.
Yeah, go ahead, Kanishka.
Yeah, and guys, again, remember that a goal should not be something like a statement. It should be something like a plan. We want to do this. Now you get to decide if you're gonna be in the proposition or the opposite. When you create the goal, write it down in the chat or tell us later that this goal is for the proposition or the opposition. You can decide.
And guys, I'll encourage you all to raise your hand and speak up, because after all, we are debaters and we shouldn't be afraid to speak. So yeah, it's 6:38. I'll give you 5 minutes till 6:43 then.
Kunwar and Naz, I might have to leave right now, if that's okay. Cool.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I have a question. Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so in that goal, do we like need to state our stance that we are either opposition or proposition, or like we need to provide like a solution,
You can decide
something
what
like that?
you want to be. You're gonna tell us about that later. What you're gonna do here is put yourself in this position. You are, maybe for example, if you were in the proposition. So what you want to do here, what is the purpose of your arguments in the first place? Why are you fighting for this topic? Why are you going with the topic for the topic? That's something you should do. What is the purpose of your arguments? For example, if I was in the proposition, what I would do is, just a second. Can you hear me now? For example, if I was in the
Yes.
proposition, if I was in the proposition of this topic, what I would do is, for example, I would say from my arguments, I want to highlight the positive impact that's going to result from doing this and that. For example, in this context, universities collect a portion of their income upon graduation. I want to highlight the positive impact that's going to come from this action. And if I was against the topic, I'm going to highlight the negatives, for example. That's something I chose. the purpose, the goal, the thing that I want, the reason I'm fighting for this topic, if that makes sense to you. You get it?
Yep, thank you.
Take your time and tell us later what you have found.
If anyone, if you all is ready, then you can raise your hand.
Can I go first? Hello.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so I might be wrong. This is my first time like trying this
Oh,
goal.
it's
So
perfectly
yeah.
fine.
So I would be in the opposition that implementing a system where universities collect a portion of graduates' income upon graduation would introduce lifelong financial burdens, limit career flexibility, and undermine the financial freedom and stability that education is meant to provide.
Very, very, very interesting. Now I see what you have done. You know, another way to do this is before you create the goal, you should generate the arguments. And then from the argument, you generate the goal. That's something I think you have done, right?
Hmm.
It's either that or you have to use ChatGPT, but we will ignore that. But that's very interesting. That's a perfect goal right there. Again, thank you very much, Bernard. And I actually remember you from yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. You are doing very good for a first time. Yesterday it was his first debate and he done very well. Now, anyone else?
I guess we need you all to speak up. It's an interactive session.
Come on, guys. It's very easy.
It's okay if
Just
you're not
yeah.
confident. It's perfectly fine.
It's just the purpose of you if you are fighting for the topic. Which link is that? What you talking about? Is there any other session being held now today other than ours?
Nope.
No, it's the effective reading class. All right, so Kunwar, do you have a goal?
You can go.
Yeah, you have a goal. Show us. All right, Branad, if you was against the topic, what would you do? What would the goal be? It's very simple.
Hello.
Yeah, yeah.
Did like
Please.
did just
Hello.
anyone call me right now? Or I might no, right?
Again? Yeah.
Did just anyone like call me right now? Pranath or something?
Yeah. I
Or
said if you have the other goal for the other opposite team, can you help us with this? Because our friends here are unable to open their microphones, I believe. So you can do
so
that.
if
Just
I would be in the proposition.
yeah.
So I guess the goal would like something begin like giving education free to all everyone across the world, as there are many people who don't have education, something like that.
Yes, but pay attention to the topic again. Just a second. All right. So pay attention to the topic again. This house believes the world prefers the word where instead of charging tuition fees. Students upfront universities collect portions from their income upon. If it was in the proposition, you would support the second subject. If you were in the opposition, you would support the first one, which is charging tuition fees for students upfront, which is the modern day thing. Like it's quite
Yeah,
what's happening now.
so I guess for second one, universities collect a portion of their income upon graduation. So till graduation, we would have like education free, right?
Yeah, but something
That's
like
up
that.
to
Now
you. It's fine. Yeah.
someone else in the chat says to create a more equitable and accessible higher education system where universities transition from charging upfront tuition fees to collecting a portion of graduates. That's very interesting. Very interesting. And as you can see, they have repeated the topic again in the go, but they have started with a statement to create a more equitable and accessible higher education system. That's very interesting. Thank you very much. That's a very interesting goal. And it's also an accurate one. To create something. Like that's my goal. That's my purpose. I want to create this. I wanted to do that. That's exactly what a goal should sound like. Good luck and thank you very much. Keep only participating with us so that you can learn more. Now you have learned how to form a goal with us and by that. All right, guys, I think we are done today. The last slide, Kunwar. If you have any questions regarding everything we have discussed here today, please take your time or ask us wherever you want. Or in debates in general. Yes?
Can you show the slide about the types of motion ones? I wanted to read the third one,
Yes.
which is the active.
Kunwar,
Yeah,
start
yeah,
from the
sure.
beginning. And now we're gonna start from the beginning, and now we're gonna give you a chance to screenshot wherever you want. If you see something interesting, then screenshot it. Take a screenshot and use it later.